He didn't even look at her when he said it. Isabella De Luca set her champagne glass down on the white tablecloth, smiled the way women learn to smile when they've been trained since birth to look pleasant while delivering poison, and said, loud enough for the whole table to hear, "Who exactly are you, sweetheart? Because no one in this city has ever heard your name." Elena Reyes felt every eye in that dining room turn toward her. 12 people. 12 strangers who could destroy her life before dessert arrived. Her hands were trembling under the table where nobody could see them. She had two choices: run, or become someone she'd never been before. If you were sitting in her chair right now, what would you do? Before we go any further, if stories like this one keep you up at night, if you've ever rooted for someone who had nothing left to lose, please hit that subscribe button right now and ring the notification bell so you never miss what comes next. Drop a comment telling me what city or country you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. And if Elena's courage moves you, leave a like. Now let's go back to the night that changed everything. The rain started around 9:30 that Tuesday night, the kind of Boston rain that doesn't announce itself. It just arrives and makes everything feel heavier than it already was. Elena Reyes walked into the Harrington Hotel bar at 11 o'clock with her blazer soaked through and her resume folder tucked under her arm, like it still meant something. It didn't. Not anymore. She'd printed 12 copies that morning and come home with 12 copies that evening. Nobody wanted an event planner who'd been let go from Meridian Events after their biggest client pulled out and took half the company's contracts with them. Nobody wanted someone who, on paper, looked like she'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time. She sat at the far end of the bar and ordered the cheapest glass of red wine they had, which turned out to be $14. She almost got up and left. Almost. But she'd been walking in the rain for 40 minutes and her feet hurt, and she needed to sit somewhere that wasn't her apartment, where Camilla would look at her face and immediately know. Camilla always knew. Her sister was 17 and sharp the way teenagers get when they've spent their whole lives reading adults' moods for survival. Their mother had passed 3 years ago. Their father had been gone long before that. Not dead, just absent in the particular way that hurts worse than death because it's a choice. Since then, it had been Elena and Camilla against whatever came next. What came next right now was 2 months of unpaid rent, a collections notice from the electric company, and a sister who was supposed to start her college prep program in the spring. Elena sipped her wine and stared at the bar counter and did not cry. She was very good at not crying in public. She'd had a lot of practice. The woman sat down beside her at 11:17. Elena noticed her the way you notice someone who doesn't fit where they are. Not because they're out of place, but because the place suddenly seems to organize itself around them. The woman was in her late 60s, maybe early 70s, wearing a charcoal wool coat that probably cost more than Elena's monthly rent. Silver hair, pulled back. Rings on 3 fingers. The kind of posture that doesn't come from yoga. It comes from decades of being someone people stood up for when they entered a room. She ordered scotch, no ice, without looking at the menu. Then she looked at Elena. Not the curious glance of someone making polite bar conversation. Something more direct than that. Assessing. "That wine," the woman said, nodding toward Elena's glass, "is not worth $14. Elena let out a short, surprised laugh. The involuntary kind. The kind that escapes before you can dress it up. "No," she agreed, "it really isn't." "Then why are you drinking it?" "Because the $12 option was sold out." The woman almost smiled. Practical. Desperate, Elena corrected, and immediately wondered why she'd said that to a complete stranger. Something about the woman made honesty feel less dangerous than it usually did. The woman studied her for a moment. "Bad day?" "Bad month." Elena turned her wine glass slowly. "Bad couple of months, if we're being accurate." "What do you do?" "Event planning. Or I did. Until last week." She paused. "I'm not sure what I do now." The woman didn't offer the usual responses. "I'm sure something will come up, or everything happens for a reason, or any of the things people say when they don't know what else to do with someone else's pain." She just nodded like she was filing the information away somewhere useful. "Do you have family?" the woman asked. "A sister. She's 17. "Is she your responsibility?" The word responsibility landed differently than Elena expected. Not as a burden, as something the woman understood the weight of. "Yes," Elena said simply. The woman picked up her scotch and took a measured sip and set it back down. Then she turned on her bar stool to face Elena more directly, and something in her expression shifted, a decision being made behind those steady gray eyes. "My name is Agnes Valenti," she said. Elena recognized the name half a second after she heard it. The Valentis were not Boston's loudest family. They didn't need to be loud. They'd been operating in this city for 3 generations, and the kind of power they carried didn't announce itself. It simply existed, like weather, like gravity, like the particular quiet that falls over a room when someone truly dangerous walks in. Elena kept her face neutral. She was good at that, too. "Elena Reyes," she said. Agnes nodded like she'd already known, which, Elena would later realize, she had. "I need something from you," Agnes said. "And in return, I can give you something that will solve your immediate problems completely." Elena's first instinct was suspicion. Her second instinct, the one she usually listened to, was to hear the woman out. "What kind of something?" Agnes didn't hesitate, didn't soften it, didn't build to it the way someone with less confidence would. "I need you to act like my son's fiancée." The bar noise continued around them, glasses clinking, the low murmur of other conversations, rain against the tall windows. Elena sat with those words for a moment and wondered if she'd misheard. She hadn't. "I'm sorry," Elena said carefully. "Your son's fiancée for one evening." Agnes set her glass down. "Tomorrow night, a family dinner." "Why?" "Because my son is being maneuvered into a marriage arrangement he did not choose and does not want, with a family whose motives I do not trust. And because the only way to interrupt that arrangement, at least temporarily, is for him to already be committed to someone else." Elena looked at this woman, this composed, expensive, quietly terrifying woman, and tried to find the angle. There was always an angle. "Why me?" she asked. "You don't know me." "I've been watching you for the last 20 minutes, Agnes said, without any embarrassment about the admission. "You've been sitting here alone, drinking wine you clearly don't enjoy, and in that entire time you haven't looked at your phone once. You haven't looked around the room to see if anyone noticed you. You haven't performed anything." She paused. "Everyone performs something when they're unhappy in public. You just sat with it." Elena didn't know what to say to that. "I don't need someone who can pretend to be wealthy," Agnes continued. "I don't need someone trained in how to behave around powerful people. I need someone who cannot be rattled, someone who tells the truth even when a lie would be easier." Her eyes stayed steady. $20,000 for one evening. The number hit Elena somewhere between her sternum and her stomach. $20,000 was Camilla's college prep program. It was 4 months of rent. It was breathing room, actual physical breathing room, in a life that had been slowly tightening around her throat for weeks. She thought about the collections notice on the kitchen counter. She thought about the look Camilla was careful not to give her, the one that said, "I know we're in trouble and I'm pretending I don't, so you won't feel worse." "Your son," Elena said. "Does he know about this?" Agnes was quiet for exactly 1 beat. "He will." "So he doesn't." "Lucian is not someone who accepts help easily." "He sounds delightful." Agnes's expression didn't change, but something shifted underneath it, something that might, in a different light, have been amusement. "He is many things. Delightful is not typically among them." Elena looked at her wine glass, looked at the rain against the windows, looked at the empty seat on her other side, and thought about her sister asleep at home right now, probably with her headphones in because she fell asleep that way when she was stressed. She thought about every reasonable objection. She had several. They were all very sensible. "I need to ask you something first," Elena said. "Ask." "What happens if it goes wrong? What happens if someone figures out I'm not," she gestured vaguely, "real?" "Then we deal with it," Agnes said. Like that was simple. Like dealing with it was something this woman had extensive experience with and found entirely manageable. "That's not very specific." "No, it isn't." Agnes met her eyes. "I won't pretend this is without risk. I won't insult your intelligence by telling you it's perfectly safe. But I will tell you that I have never started something I could not finish, and I have been protecting my family for 40 years. She tilted her head slightly. "The question is whether you trust your own instincts." Elena's instincts, at that particular moment, were telling her approximately 17 different things simultaneously. I want the money up front, Elena said. Half tonight, half after. Agnes reached into her coat without a word, produced an envelope, and set it on the bar between them. 10,000, the rest after dinner tomorrow. Elena looked at the envelope, did not touch it yet. I'm going to need to know what I'm walking into, she said. Everything, the family, the dinner, what I'm supposed to say, what I'm not supposed to say. I need a full briefing before I walk through any door. You'll have it. And if your son decides to throw me out the moment he sees me, he won't. How can you be sure? Agnes picked up her scotch and finished it in one clean motion and set the glass down. Because I am his mother, she said, and he has never, in his entire life, been able to look at me and say no when it matters. There was something underneath those words. Not weakness. Nothing about this woman suggested weakness. Something older than that. The particular grief of a parent who has watched their child build walls so high they disappeared behind them. Elena picked up the envelope. It was heavier than she expected, which was strange because it was only paper, but it felt like a door opening, or maybe like a door closing. She wasn't sure which. Tell me about Lucian, she said. Agnes was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful in a way it hadn't been before. My son is 34 years old. He took over our family's operations when he was 26, after his father became ill. He is brilliant, and he is controlled, and he has spent the last 8 years believing that the only way to protect the people he loves is to keep every single one of them at arm's length. She paused. When he was 28, he was engaged. Her name was Sophia. She was the daughter of an allied family, and he, despite himself, he cared for her. Agnes's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She was feeding information to our rivals for 11 months before we discovered it. She was using his trust as a transaction. Elena felt the weight of that land. He hasn't trusted anyone since, Agnes said. Not really. Not the way a person is supposed to trust. He has allies, he has associates. He has people who are loyal to him because they fear him, or because he pays them, or because they owe him something. She looked at Elena directly. He does not have anyone who simply chooses him. The bar had gotten quieter around them. Or maybe Elena had just stopped hearing it. You want me to be that person, Elena said slowly, for one night. I want you to be honest, Agnes said. That's all. Whatever questions they ask you, tell the truth. About who you are, where you come from, what your life is. Don't perform wealth you don't have or connections you don't possess. The DeLucas will try to discredit you. The best defense against that is that you have nothing to hide. Except the part where I'm not actually his fiancée. Yes, Agnes said evenly. Except that part. Elena almost laughed. It wasn't funny. It was slightly funny. The DeLucas, she said. That's the family. Victor DeLuca. He's been trying to formalize an alliance with ours through a marriage between Lucian and his daughter Isabella for 2 years. Lucian has refused. Victor has been persistent. Agnes's expression didn't change, but her voice dropped half a register. He is not a man who accepts no gracefully. And Lucian, he definitely doesn't want this marriage? Lucian doesn't want any marriage, but this one least of all. Agnes paused. Victor DeLuca is not a trustworthy man. I know what his alliance would cost us, even if Lucian has not fully admitted it to himself yet. Elena turned the envelope over in her hands. $10,000. Her sister's future. 4 months of not drowning. 1 dinner. 1 lie. If you could call it that. More like an omission. An agreement to stand next to someone and not deny it. She'd done harder things. She thought of Camilla's face in the morning, the careful way her sister pretended not to notice when Elena skipped eating so there'd be enough food for both of them. She thought of the electric bill. She thought of the college prep program brochure Camilla had left on the kitchen table without comment, like a message in a bottle she wasn't sure anyone would find. Okay, Elena said. Agnes looked at her steadily. You understand what you're agreeing to. I understand what I'm agreeing to tonight, Elena said. 1 dinner, 1 evening. After that, whatever arrangement you've made with your son is between you and him. Agnes nodded slowly. One more thing. Of course. Lucian will be angry when he sees you. He will be cold. He may be sharp with you in ways that feel personal. Agnes held her gaze. Don't apologize for existing. Don't make yourself smaller to accommodate his discomfort. If you do that, they'll see it immediately, and everything falls apart. Elena thought about every job interview she'd ever been in, every client who'd spoken down to her, every room she'd walked into where she wasn't supposed to belong, and walked through anyway. "I don't do smaller," she said. Agnes studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded, once, with the particular finality of someone who has made their decision and is at peace with it. "The car will pick you up at 6 tomorrow evening," she said, and slid a card across the bar with a number on it. "My private line. Call if you have questions tonight." She stood, buttoned her coat, and picked up her bag. "Mrs. Valenti," Elena said. Agnes paused. "Why did you come here tonight? To this bar specifically?" Agnes looked at her for a moment with something that wasn't quite a smile and wasn't quite sadness, and was probably some combination of the two that doesn't have a clean name. "I come here every year on this date," she said. "My husband proposed to me at that table in the corner, 41 years ago." A beat. "He has been gone for 6 years now, but this bar still feels like him." She turned and walked away through the quiet bar, and the door opened and closed behind her, and Elena sat alone again with a wine she didn't want, and an envelope that felt like a grenade, and the particular feeling of a person who has just made a decision that cannot be unmade. She sat there for a long time. Then she thought of Camilla. Then she put the envelope in her bag, left $2 on the bar as an apology to the bartender, and walked back out into the Boston rain. She didn't sleep that night. Not really. She lay in the dark and went through every reasonable way this could go wrong, and there were many of them, and she went through all of them carefully and methodically the way she approached every problem. Not because it made her feel better, but because knowing the worst possibilities in advance meant they couldn't blindside her. But there was one thing she hadn't been able to account for. She hadn't accounted for what Lucian Valenti would look like when he turned to face her across the entrance hall of his family's home, and the exact expression on his face. Not anger, not cold indifference, but something rawer and more guarded than either of those things. Something that looked almost like a man recognizing a threat he hadn't prepared for. She hadn't accounted for the way he looked at her like she was a problem he desperately needed to solve, and wasn't sure he could. She hadn't accounted for the fact that she would look back and not look away. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, Elena Reyes walked home through the rain with $10,000 in her bag and a stranger's business card in her pocket, and for the first time in 2 months, she didn't feel like she was falling. She felt like she was standing at the edge of something. She just didn't know yet whether it was solid ground or open air. The car arrived at exactly 6 o'clock. Not 6:01, not 5:58. 6 o'clock, as if the universe itself had been instructed to be punctual. Elena had been standing at her apartment window for 20 minutes, watching the street below, wearing the only dress she owned that could plausibly belong in a room with people like Agnes Valenti. A midnight blue wrap dress she'd bought 3 years ago for a client's wedding and had worn exactly twice since. She'd pressed it the night before with an iron that kept sticking, leaving a faint ridge along the left side that she'd spent the morning pretending wasn't visible. Camilla had watched her get ready from the doorway of the bathroom without saying anything for a long time. Then, "Where are you going?" "A networking dinner," Elena had said, which was technically not a lie if you were willing to define networking very loosely. "In that dress? Is something wrong with the dress?" Camilla had tilted her head with the particular expression she'd inherited from their mother, the one that said, "I know you're not telling me everything, and I'm deciding whether to push it." "You look good," she'd said finally. "Just be careful, okay?" Elena had kissed her sister on the forehead and not answered the question. Now she stood on the sidewalk in the November cold and watched the black car idle in front of her building and told herself that the tightness in her chest was just the weather. The driver didn't speak during the 40-minute ride north. That was fine. Elena didn't want conversation. She wanted to sit with the silence and run through everything Agnes had told her during the 2-hour call the previous night. The family dynamics, the history, the specific landmines she needed to avoid. Victor De Luca's temper. Isabella's precision. The way Lucian Valenti operated in a room, which Agnes described as, "He listens more than he speaks, and every silence is intentional, so don't try to fill them." Elena had written notes on the back of a grocery receipt, which she'd read so many times on the train that morning that she could recite them from memory. She'd burned the receipt in the kitchen sink after. That had felt overly dramatic in the moment, but Agnes had suggested it, and Agnes did not appear to be someone who suggested things without reason. The Valenti estate was not what Elena had expected. She wasn't sure what she'd expected. Something ostentatious, maybe. Something that announced itself. Instead, the car turned through a set of iron gates and up a long driveway lined with bare November trees, and the house at the end of it was old and serious and large, in the way that didn't need to prove anything. Dark stone. Tall windows. A front entrance lit by 2 lanterns that threw orange light against the gravel. It looked like a place where decisions were made that other people had to live with. The driver opened her door. Elena stepped out. The cold hit her immediately, and she had a brief, vivid moment of wanting to get back in the car. She didn't. The front door opened before she reached it, and the woman who opened it was not Agnes. It was a woman in her 40s in dark clothing who looked at Elena with the polite blankness of someone paid to be invisible and said, "Mrs. Valenti is waiting in the sitting room. Mr. Valenti is—" She paused almost imperceptibly. Indisposed at the moment. Indisposed. Elena filed that away. Agnes was standing when Elena entered the sitting room, and for a moment she just looked at Elena the way a general looks at a plan they've committed to and are now hoping holds. Then something in her shoulders settled slightly. "You came," Agnes said. "I said I would." "People say a great many things." Agnes crossed to her and adjusted the collar of Elena's dress with the brisk, unsentimental efficiency of someone who had dressed people for important occasions before. "The DeLucas will arrive at 7. That gives us 40 minutes. "Where's your son?" Agnes's expression did something complicated. "He came home 2 hours ago. I told him we needed to speak. He told me he had calls to make." She paused. "He has been making calls for 2 hours. He's avoiding you. He is extraordinarily good at making avoidance look like productivity." Agnes picked up a small velvet box from the side table and handed it to Elena. "Put this on." Elena opened it. A ring, oval diamond, gold band, simple and real, and probably worth more than her car had been before it died in September. Her hand was steady when she slid it onto her finger. She was proud of that. "It was mine," Agnes said quietly. "My engagement ring, before Lucian's father bought me the other one." She looked at it on Elena's hand for a moment. It seemed right. Elena didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. They heard him before they saw him. Not his voice, footsteps. Deliberate, unhurried footsteps on hardwood, the kind that belong to someone who has never needed to rush because the world has learned to wait for them. Then the door to the sitting room opened, and Lucian Valenti walked in, still on the phone, jacket on, tie loosened by exactly half an inch, and he looked at his mother first, the automatic habitual look of a man who has learned to read Agnes Valenti's expressions for danger the way sailors read weather. He read her expression. Then he looked at Elena. He did not freeze. He did not react with any of the visible shock that Elena had braced for. He simply stopped walking, said into the phone, calm, flat, final, "I'll call you back," and hung up. The silence that followed lasted approximately 4 seconds. It felt considerably longer. "No," he said. "Lucian, no." He looked at his mother with an expression that was not anger yet, or not just anger. It was something more exhausted than that, something that had been waiting to be disappointed and had just been given the opportunity. "Whatever this is, no. The DeLucas arrive in 38 minutes. Then we'll have dinner with the DeLucas. And Victor will have his alliance by the end of it," Agnes said, and her voice didn't rise, didn't change. That steadiness was somehow worse than shouting would have been. "Is that what you want?" "What I want," Lucian said, enunciating with careful precision, "is to not come home from 3 days in New York to find a stranger in my sitting room wearing my mother's ring." Elena stood very still. She'd been prepared for cold. She'd been prepared for dismissal. What she hadn't been quite prepared for was the specific quality of Lucian Valenti's gaze when it finally fully landed on her. Not hostile, not curious, but deeply, carefully assessing in a way that made her feel like every surface layer of her was being X-rayed. "My name is Elena Reyes," she said, because someone had to say something. "I know this isn't what you expected to walk into." "That," Lucian said, "is a significant understatement." Lucian. Agnes's voice had an edge now, the kind you hear and understand is the final edge before something worse. "Sit down." He didn't sit, but he stopped moving, which was probably the closest concession available. "She approached me," Elena said carefully.
I didn't. This wasn't something I sought out. Your mother made me an offer and I accepted it, and I understand completely if you want me to leave. But if I'm going to leave, I'd rather do it now than after I've wasted 40 minutes of your time and mine. Something moved across Lucian's face at that. A flicker, fast and controlled, gone before it fully arrived. He looked at his mother. How much? He asked. Agnes didn't flinch. 20,000. 20. He stopped, pressed his fingers to the bridge of his nose. In that moment, with the careful armor temporarily displaced, Elena could see it. The exhaustion he was carrying. Real exhaustion. The kind that doesn't come from missed sleep, but from years of operating at a level of vigilance that doesn't allow for rest. You hired someone off the street. I hired someone I spent 20 minutes observing who demonstrated more genuine character than anyone in our social circle has in the past decade, Agnes said flatly. You spent 20 minutes with her. I spent 20 minutes watching her. There's a difference. That is not a defense of your judgment, Mother. That is a description of your method. It worked once before, Agnes said quietly. The room temperature seemed to drop. Lucian was very still for a moment. Don't. I'm simply saying, I said don't. His voice didn't get louder. It got quieter, which Elena was beginning to understand was more concerning. He turned to her. What did she tell you? About our family? About why you're here? She told me about the DeLucas, Elena said. About Victor's marriage proposal and why you've refused it. She told me you need someone beside you tonight who isn't part of an arrangement. She paused. She didn't tell me specifics about your business operations. I didn't ask. Why not? Because I don't need to know and I didn't want to know, Elena said. I need to get through one dinner. I don't need a complete education in your family's affairs to do that. He stared at her. She stared back. Don't make yourself smaller. Agnes's voice from the night before, in that hotel bar. If you do that, they'll see it immediately. The DeLucas will take you apart, Lucian said. It wasn't a threat. It sounded almost like a warning, which was a different thing entirely. Probably, Elena agreed. But I've been taken apart before. I'm still here. Another silence. This one felt different from the first one. What's your background? He asked, and his voice had shifted slightly. Still guarded, but the temperature had changed. Event planning. I worked for Meridian Events for 4 years. I lost the job 2 weeks ago when a major client pulled out. Before that, I graduated from BU with a degree in communications, put myself through the last 2 years because our mother died mid-semester and the financial aid situation got complicated. She said it evenly, without apology, the way you present facts. I have a 17-year-old sister. I live in Alston. I drive. I used to drive a 2014 Civic that broke down in September, and I haven't replaced it yet. He listened to all of this without expression. And you agreed to this, he said, for $20,000. Yes. That's honest. You asked an honest question. He looked at her for a long moment, and Elena could see him running calculations she wasn't going to be made privy to, variables she couldn't see, factors she didn't know. Then he looked at his mother. 34 minutes, Agnes said. Lucian turned and walked to the window, stood there with his back to both of them. Outside, the driveway was dark and empty. Isabella will go after your background, he said, without turning. She's thorough and she's patient, and she will find a thread and pull it. She has destroyed more than one person in a room because they left a single piece of themselves exposed. I know, Elena said. Your mother told me. My mother told you how to handle Isabella DeLuca? She told me the best defense against someone trying to expose me as a fraud is that I have nothing to hide. He turned then, looked at her across the room. You've got exactly one thing to hide, he said. I know, but that's not what Isabella's going to come at me with first. She's going to come at me with who I am, where I came from, why I'm with you. Elena met his eyes, and the answer to all of those questions is the truth. The truth being that I'm not for money, that I built what I have myself and I'm currently in the process of rebuilding it, that I met your family under unexpected circumstances and I'm still standing here. She let a beat pass. None of that is a lie. It's just not the whole story. Lucian Valenti looked at her like she was something he hadn't anticipated and didn't yet have a category for. Fine, he said. The word fell out like a door closing. Agnes exhaled once,
very quietly. The next 30 minutes were the strangest of Elena's life, and she had experienced some genuinely strange minutes. Agnes moved through the room with efficient calm, walking them through the dinner seating, the evening's agenda, the specific dynamics at the DeLuca table that Elena needed to understand. Lucian listened with his jacket back on and his face arranged in the neutral, closed expression of a man in a briefing he hadn't asked for, which Elena gathered was simply his face during most things. At one point, Agnes said, "You'll need to look like you're comfortable with each other." Lucian's jaw tightened. "We'll manage. You're standing 12 feet apart. We just met. Victor DeLuca has been watching you for 2 years. He knows every woman you've spoken to at every function you've attended. The moment you walk in that room, he is going to be looking for any reason to believe this isn't real." Agnes turned to Elena. "Take his arm when you enter. Don't wait for him to offer it." Elena nodded. She didn't look at Lucian to see how he felt about that. The DeLucas arrived at 7:03. Victor DeLuca was taller than Elena had imagined from Agnes's description. He had the build of someone who had been physically large their whole life and had let it become a tool. He took up space the way some men do, deliberately, as if to remind everyone present that any given room could become uncomfortable at his discretion. Late 60s, silver-templed, with the fixed smile of a man who has trained himself to look pleasant over decades of being neither. Isabella DeLuca was 26 and had the kind of beauty that is immediately legible as a weapon. She walked into the Valenti entrance hall in a red dress with perfect posture and eyes that moved to Elena in approximately 2 seconds and did not move away again for a very long time. Elena had met women like Isabella before. She'd worked events where they circled rooms like weather systems, drawing everything toward them or destroying it. She knew the type. She did not flinch. Lucian was beside her when the DeLucas entered, close enough that when he moved to extend a hand to Victor, his jacket sleeve brushed Elena's arm. She'd taken his arm at the door, as Agnes had instructed, and he had allowed it with the expression of a man tolerating a medical procedure. But he hadn't pulled away. "Victor," Lucian said. The two men shook hands with the particular pressure of people measuring each other. "Lucian." Victor's smile widened. His eyes moved to Elena. "And this must be... I'm sorry, I don't believe we've been introduced." "Elena Reyes," Lucian said. He said it the way you say something you've decided to commit to. No hesitation, no qualifying. "My fiancée." Elena watched Isabella's face. She was good. She was very good. The flicker of shock lasted maybe half a second, and then she had it under control, replaced with something that looked almost like warmth and was absolutely not. "Elena," Isabella said, stepping forward to take both Elena's hands in hers. Her grip was very slightly too tight. "What a wonderful surprise. We had absolutely no idea Lucian was... When did this happen?" "Recently," Elena said, smiling. "He surprised me too, honestly." "I can only imagine." Isabella's eyes moved over Elena's face with the systematic efficiency of a scanner. "How did you two meet?" "Through family," Elena said, which was true, in the loosest possible sense. "Agnes and I got to talking at an event, and..." She glanced toward Lucian, and he looked back at her, and for a moment the two of them were doing something that wasn't quite acting and wasn't quite real, and Elena wasn't entirely sure where the boundary was. Things developed from there. "An event planner," Victor said from the side, and Elena turned to him. He was holding a drink he'd acquired from somewhere and looking at her with the pleasantly fixed smile that didn't reach his eyes. Agnes mentioned, "What firm?" "Meridian," Elena said. "I'm in transition at the moment, starting my own practice." "Meridian." Victor turned the name over. "They had some trouble recently, didn't they? Lost a significant client." He knew. He already knew. Elena had the brief, vertiginous realization that Victor DeLuca had done his homework between the invitation and arriving at the door, and the homework included her. "Every firm loses clients," Elena said pleasantly. "The ones worth keeping learn from it." Victor's smile widened by a millimeter. Beside her, Elena felt rather than saw Lucian register that exchange. Dinner was served at 7:30. The table was set for 8, Agnes at one end, Lucian at the other, with Elena to his right and Isabella to his left, which was either a coincidence or Agnes being deliberately unkind. Elena couldn't determine which. Victor sat across from Elena, which meant she spent the first course under the crossfire of Victor, watching her from the front and Isabella from the side. She ate her soup and answered questions and kept her voice even. She talked about growing up in Boston, about her mother, about Camilla. She mentioned Camilla by name and watched something shift in Lucian's expression when she talked about her sister. A brief softening that he controlled immediately, but that had been there. She talked about building her event planning practice from scratch, about the clients she'd worked with, about what she was good at. She talked about who she was with, the particular ease that comes from telling the truth. And she watched Isabella searching for the thread, the loose edge, the exposed seam, and finding nothing because there was nothing to find. The main course arrived. Isabella waited until the plates were set down and then said pleasantly, into a brief silence, "How long have you actually been seeing each other?" The table adjusted. Everyone present understood the question was not innocent. "Long enough," Lucian said. "Of course," Isabella said, smiling at him. Then, to Elena, "He's terribly private, isn't he? 4 years I've known this family, and I feel like I barely know him." A pause. "Do you find that? That he keeps things close?" Elena looked at Lucian, and he looked back at her, and for that specific moment she was not performing anything. She was genuinely looking at this man, this guarded, exhausted, complicated man, and she said, "Yes, but the things he keeps close are worth the patience it takes to get to them." Something happened at the table. She felt it before she could name it. A shift in the air, the particular silence that follows a statement that has landed somewhere it wasn't expected to reach. Victor's smile slipped a fraction. Agnes was looking at her coffee. Isabella's eyes narrowed slightly, and Lucian was looking at Elena with an expression that she had not been briefed on, that Agnes had not warned her about, that was not on any grocery receipt she'd burned in any kitchen sink. He looked at her like she'd said something that was true about him that he hadn't told her. The rest of the dinner passed in the careful, tactical back and forth of people who are fighting without making it visible. Victor probed. Elena answered. Isabella circled. Lucian said very little, but the few things he said were timed with the precision of a man who understands exactly when silence has done as much as it can and a single sentence will do more. At one point he reached across the table for the water pitcher, and his hand brushed Elena's on the way. Brief, accidental, and neither of them commented on it, and Elena told herself the warmth she felt was simply the room. It was 9:15 when Victor DeLuca set his dessert fork down and said, with the particular tone of someone removing the pleasant surface of a conversation to get to the machinery underneath, "I'd like to speak frankly." Agnes said, "Please do." "This engagement is sudden," Victor said, looking at Lucian. "Very sudden. And I think we all understand that the timing, given our ongoing discussions, is notable." "Engagements tend to be sudden," Lucian said. "That's generally the nature of them." "Lucian." Victor's voice lost 3 degrees of warmth. "I have a great deal of respect for your family, for Agnes, for what your father built. I would like to continue that relationship in good faith." His eyes moved to Elena. "But I think it would serve everyone well to be honest about what's happening here." Elena held Victor DeLuca's gaze across the table and understood, in that moment, that this man was not going to let the evening end cleanly. He had come here with something prepared. He had done his research, more research than her background, more than Meridian events, more than her, and she could see it in the way he was sitting, the confidence of someone who is about to produce something. She glanced at Lucian. His face told her nothing. Victor reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and produced his phone. Set it on the table, face up, and slid it across toward the center. On the screen was a photograph. Elena looked at it. It was a photograph of her from the previous night, taken from a distance. She was standing outside the Harrington Hotel. She was holding an envelope. Agnes was visible in the frame, walking through the door behind her. The room was very quiet. "My people were following up on a separate matter near that hotel last night," Victor said. The pleasant surface was entirely gone now. "And they happened to capture something interesting." He looked at Agnes. "You met with her last night, for the first time." He looked at Lucian. "There is no engagement. There is no relationship." He leaned back. "What there is whatever this is. And I'd like to understand why your family felt the need to construct it." Elena was aware of her own heartbeat. She was aware of Lucian going very still beside her. She was aware of Agnes's hands, flat on the table, perfectly motionless. She was aware of Isabella watching her with something that looked, finally, like satisfaction. The thing about being caught in a lie is that there are only two responses available, and Elena understood both of them in the 2 seconds she had before someone else filled the silence. She could fold, or she could go forward. She picked up her wine glass, took a single deliberate sip, and set it back down. "Yes," she said. "Agnes and I met last night." Victor's eyes flickered. "She approached me," Elena continued, and her voice was even, unhurried, like someone explaining something simple. "She was direct about what she wanted and why. And I made a decision to come here tonight." She looked at Victor across the table. "What you're describing as a constructed engagement is a relationship in its very early stages that Agnes believed deserved the opportunity to develop without outside pressure." She paused. "I understand that's inconvenient for your plans, but the photograph on your phone shows two women having a conversation. It doesn't show you anything else." Victor looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Lucian. Lucian had not moved, had not changed expression, had not done anything in the 6 seconds since the phone appeared on the table, except look at it once, and then look at Elena. "Is that your account as well?" Victor asked him. The table held its breath. Lucian reached out slowly and turned the phone face down on the tablecloth. Then he looked at Victor with an expression Elena could not read but understood was significant. "Elena is here because she chose to be," Lucian said. "The rest is between her and my family." "That's not an answer." "No," Lucian agreed, "it isn't." Victor's jaw tightened. For the first time that evening, his composure showed its edges. "Lucian," he said quietly now, which was different from before, "I have been patient. I have been respectful of your position. But I want you to understand that my patience has—" "Victor," Lucian's voice was very calm. "You brought surveillance photographs to my family's dinner table." A pause. "I want you to sit with what that says about your good faith before you make another statement about mine." The silence that followed was a different kind of silence. Victor DeLuca sat back. Isabella's expression was unreadable. Agnes had not moved. Elena's hands, under the table, were trembling, not from fear, from the particular adrenaline of having walked directly into a fire and not caught. Not yet. Dinner ended at 9:50, with the brittle cordiality of people who have said too much and are now managing what comes next. Victor DeLuca stood and shook Lucian's hand, and his grip lasted a beat longer than necessary, and then he looked at Elena with his fixed smile and said, "A pleasure, Ms. Reyes," and meant absolutely none of it. Isabella hugged Agnes and said nothing to Elena at all, which was somehow worse. When the DeLuca cars disappeared down the driveway, Elena stood in the entrance hall and let herself breathe for the first time in what felt like 3 hours. Her shoulders dropped half an inch. She hadn't realized how far they'd been pulled up. Agnes said, to no one in particular, "That went as well as it could have." "He had someone following you," Lucian said. He wasn't looking at either of them. He was looking at the door. "He had someone at that hotel." "Yes," Agnes said, "which means he was already suspicious before tonight." Lucian's voice was quiet in a way that was not calm. "Which means this was never about dinner." "No," Agnes agreed, "it wasn't." Elena looked between them. "What does that mean? For the arrangement?" Lucian turned to look at her. In the entrance hall light, with the performance of dinner stripped away, she could see what the evening had cost him. The controlled exhaustion, the same walls back up that had been briefly complicated by that moment at the table she wasn't supposed to keep thinking about. "It means," he said, "that one dinner was never going to be enough." The second $10,000 arrived in Elena's account at 11 that night, as Agnes had promised. She was sitting on the edge of her bed in Alston with her shoes off and her hands in her lap when her phone lit up with the transfer notification. She looked at it for a long time. She thought about what was reasonable to do next. She thought about calling Agnes in the morning and saying thank you. "It was an experience. I hope everything works out. Goodbye." Her phone rang. It was an unknown number. She answered anyway. She always answered unknown numbers, because unknown numbers had a way of being important when you were perpetually waiting for something to go wrong. "Ms. Reyes," Victor DeLuca's voice, quiet and pleasant and absolutely not either of those things. "I hope you'll forgive the late hour." Elena went very still. "I wanted to let you know," Victor said, "that I enjoyed meeting you this evening. And I want to be clear. Whatever arrangement you've made with the Valenti family, it can end very simply. All you need to do is walk away. A pause. If you don't, I'll find the thing you're most afraid of losing, and I'll start there. The line went dead. Elena sat in the dark in her apartment in Alston and listened to the silence and thought about Camilla asleep down the hall and understood with complete and terrible clarity that she was not standing at the edge of something anymore. She had already fallen in. That was the sentence she'd left unfinished in her own head at the end of the night, sitting in the dark with Victor DeLuca's voice still echoing in the apartment. She had already fallen in, and the water was deeper than she'd understood when she'd stepped off the edge. And now the only question was whether she could swim. She didn't sleep. She lay on top of her covers in her dress until 2 in the morning, then changed into a t-shirt and lay under them until 4, then got up and made coffee. She didn't drink and stood at the kitchen window watching the street go gray with early light. Boston in November made the dark last longer than it should. She'd always hated that about this month. At 6:15, Camilla's alarm went off down the hall. Elena heard her sister move through the apartment, bathroom, kitchen, the particular sound of the cabinet where they kept cereal, then quiet footsteps to the kitchen doorway. "You didn't sleep," Camilla said. "I slept a little." "You're still wearing yesterday's eyeliner." Elena touched her face. She was. "I'm fine." Camilla looked at her the way she always looked at her, careful, patient, reading something Elena hadn't said out loud. She was 17 and she had their mother's eyes, and she was, Elena thought for the 10,000th time, going to be extraordinary if the world would just give her the room for it. "Is this about the job?" Camilla asked. "It's about a lot of things," Elena said. "Go eat something. You'll be late." Camilla didn't move. Elena. "Camilla, I'm not 12. I know you're not. So stop doing that thing where you make your voice go flat so I can't read it." Camilla leaned against the door frame with her arms crossed, and she looked so much like their mother in that position that Elena had to look at the window instead. "Whatever's happening, I'm going to find out eventually. I always do." That was true. It was always true. "I took a job last night," Elena said carefully. "A consulting job. It's complicated, and I can't explain all of it right now, but it's going to help us. The rent, the electric bill, Camilla's program." She stopped. "It's going to help." Camilla studied her. "What kind of consulting?" "Event management, private client." Not entirely a lie. "It might require me to be unavailable for a few weeks." "Unavailable meaning what?" "Meaning there are things I can't tell you about. Yet." Elena met her sister's eyes. "I need you to trust me." Camilla was quiet for a moment, then, "Do I need to be worried?" The honest answer was yes. The honest answer was that a man she'd met over dinner had called her after midnight with a threat she'd spent the night trying to decide whether to take seriously or dismiss, and every instinct she had, the same instincts that had kept them both alive through 3 years of being on their own, was telling her to take it seriously. She said, "I'm handling it." Camilla looked at her for 3 more seconds. Then she pushed off the doorframe and went to get her cereal, and Elena listened to her sister move around the kitchen and told herself that handling it was the same as having it handled, which she knew was not true, but needed to believe for the next several hours. She called Agnes at 7:30. Agnes answered on the second ring. "I expected you to call earlier." "He called me last night," Elena said. "Victor DeLuca, after I got home." A pause, brief but present. "What did he say?" "That I should walk away from the arrangement. That if I didn't, he'd find what I was most afraid of losing and start there." Elena kept her voice steady. "He knows about Camilla." Silence on the line. A different kind of silence than Agnes's usual measured pauses. This one had weight in it. "How much did he say?" Agnes asked. "He didn't need to say much. The implication was enough." Elena sat down at the kitchen table. "I need to know if this is something your family can actually contain, or if I've walked into something I can't walk back out of." "Elena, I'm not asking for reassurance. I'm asking for honesty. You wanted honesty. Give me the same." Another pause. Then Agnes said, "Come to the estate. Not this evening. This morning. There are things you need to know that I did not tell you before because I was not certain they were relevant." A beat. "I was wrong about that." Elena looked at the clock on the kitchen wall. 7:34. Camilla would leave for school in 20 minutes. "I'll be there at 9, she said. She got there at 8:57. Lucian's car was in the driveway. She noted that. She hadn't been told he'd be there. Agnes met her in the entrance hall, and the first thing Elena noticed was that Agnes looked like someone who had also not slept, which was the first time in Elena's limited experience of her that Agnes Valenti looked like anything less than completely composed. It was a small difference, a slight tightness around the eyes, something in the way she held her coffee cup like she needed it rather than wanted it. But it was there. "He's in the study," Agnes said, before Elena could ask. "You said he didn't need to know I was coming. He was already here when you called." Agnes turned and walked toward the back of the house. "Come." The study was a room Elena hadn't been in during the dinner, darker than the sitting room, books on 2 walls, a desk that looked like it had been used hard for decades. Lucian was standing at the window with his back to the door when they entered, and he turned when he heard them, and Elena could see immediately that his night had been no better than hers. He looked at her and said nothing. Agnes sat down. Elena stayed standing. Lucian moved from the window to the desk and leaned against it with his arms crossed, and the three of them existed in the same room in a silence that had too much in it. "Victor called her," Agnes said to Lucian. "I know." His jaw tightened. "He called me at 2 in the morning as well." Elena looked at him. "What did he say to you?" "That he had evidence of a fraudulent engagement, and that he intended to present it to the families at a gathering he's convening in 4 days. Lucian's voice was flat, each word precise. "That he would give me until Thursday to dissolve the arrangement and come to the table with him directly, or he would use what he has to destroy our family's standing with every allied family in Boston." Elena absorbed that. "What does that mean, practically?" "It means our contracts, our alliances, our protection agreements. All of it operates on a foundation of trust within a specific community," Lucian said. "If Victor successfully frames this as a deception campaign orchestrated by my family, that foundation breaks. Other families distance themselves. Business dries up. And in the vacuum that creates," he stopped. "Other problems emerge," Agnes finished. "What kind of problems?" Elena said. "The kind with guns," Lucian said without inflection. Elena sat down then. She hadn't planned to, but her legs made the decision. "He has 4 days," she said. "And you have 4 days." "Yes." "So what happens in 4 days?" Lucian looked at his mother. Agnes looked at her coffee. That exchange, the brevity of it, the weight of it, told Elena that what came next was the thing Agnes had said on the phone that morning she'd been wrong not to tell her. "There's something about Victor DeLuca that I didn't tell you before the dinner," Agnes said. She set her coffee down. "I told you he was persistent. I told you he was not trustworthy. I did not tell you why I know that with certainty." Elena waited. 8 years ago," Agnes said, "when Lucian was engaged to Sofia Carano, the woman I mentioned, the one who was passing information to our rivals, I always believed it was Sofia who initiated that relationship, that she had approached the rivals and offered them access." Agnes's hands, flat on the desk, were very still. 3 months ago, I received documentation from a source I trust that suggested otherwise." She paused. "It was Victor who recruited Sofia. Victor who approached her 3 months into her engagement to Lucian and offered her family's debt clearance in exchange for information." Agnes looked at Elena directly. "He engineered Lucian's first betrayal, and then he spent the next 6 years positioning himself as a reasonable business partner while the damage that betrayal caused continued to shape everything in this family." The room was very quiet. Elena looked at Lucian. He was looking at the window. His profile was controlled in the way she was beginning to understand meant something was happening underneath it that he was not going to let surface in front of her. "He destroyed your engagement," Elena said, "and then tried to arrange a new one. To give himself a position inside this family that he couldn't take from the outside," Lucian said. He didn't look away from the window. "With Isabella beside me, he would have had access to everything, every decision, every operation." A beat. "It's elegant, actually, if you don't think about what it cost." Elena looked at Agnes. "You said 3 months ago. Why didn't you—" "I went to Lucian with it immediately," Agnes said. "He asked me to wait. To confirm the documentation before acting on it. To be certain." She looked at her son's back. "We have been in the process of confirming it." "And?" Elena said. "It's confirmed," Lucian said to the window, "as of 48 hours ago." Elena let that land. "So Victor knows, you know." Almost certainly. Lucian finally turned from the window. Which is why he moved when he did. The photograph, the phone call, the gathering in 4 days. He's not reacting to the engagement. He's preempting what he knows is coming. His eyes found Elena's. He's trying to destroy our credibility before we can use what we have against him. Elena felt the shape of it now, the full shape. Victor DeLuca had spent years building towards something, and the thing he'd built it toward was now at risk. And a man who had already proven he was willing to destroy a 28-year-old's capacity for trust to get what he wanted was not going to develop a conscience about what else he was willing to do. He threatened my sister, Elena said. I know, Lucian said. I need you to understand that's not something I can treat as an abstract risk. I know that too. So what do I do? She looked at him, not at Agnes, at Lucian. What are you asking me to do? He held her gaze for a moment. Then he walked to the desk and sat down in the chair across from Agnes, and Elena had the brief, disorienting sense that the three of them were in some kind of negotiation where the stakes had just been fully revealed to all parties for the first time. I'm not asking you to do anything, Lucian said. I'm telling you what the situation is and letting you make an informed decision, which is what you asked for. The informed decision being that if you walk away now, Victor has no more leverage over you directly. You go back to your life. He has no interest in you as a private individual, only as a piece of the arrangement. He paused. But Camilla is already a known factor. He mentioned her specifically. Yes. Which means walking away doesn't fully remove the risk. It just changes its shape. Elena's jaw tightened. And staying. Staying means we fight this together. It means the documentation we have against Victor goes before the same families at the same gathering in 4 days, and we let them make a judgment. He said it carefully, without urgency, like someone presenting facts. It also means Camilla is under our protection from this moment forward, actively, not as an afterthought. Elena looked at him. You'd do that. I would do that, he said. Like it was obvious. Like it didn't require any elaboration. She wanted to ask him why. She didn't ask him why. She stored the question somewhere. There's a third thing, Agnes said. Both of them looked at her. Agnes had her hands folded on the desk now, and she had the expression of someone about to say something they have been carrying for a long time and have finally decided to put down. Victor's documentation about the engagement, she said. The photograph, whatever else he has, it will be persuasive because it is accurate. A photograph of me with Elena the night before the dinner is damaging because it's real. She paused. The only way to counter it is with something equally real. We have the documentation about Sophia, Lucian said. That counters his character, Agnes said. It doesn't counter his evidence about the engagement. She looked at Elena, then at Lucian. The families who will be at that gathering do not make decisions based on justice. They make decisions based on what they believe. And what they will believe, when Victor presents his case, is that everything about Elena's presence in this family was manufactured. It was manufactured, Elena said. That's the problem. At the beginning, Agnes said. Yes. She held Elena's gaze steadily. Is it still? The question landed in the room and stayed there. Elena didn't answer it. She wasn't sure she had an answer that was safe to give out loud. Lucian pushed back from the desk and stood up abruptly, and for a moment Elena thought he was going to leave the room. The controlled, abrupt exit of a man who has reached the edge of what he can sit with. But instead he just stood there with one hand on the desk and looked at nothing. Mother, he said, I'm being practical. You're being something else. I'm being both, Agnes said without apology. He looked at Elena. It was the look from the dinner table, the one she hadn't been prepared for, the one that was not performing anything. We don't need to resolve that now, he said to Elena. What we need to resolve now is your sister's safety and our position before Thursday. He straightened. Will you stay at the estate while we work through this? Both of you. You and Camilla. You want me to bring Camilla here? I want her somewhere Victor can't reach her. A pause. This house has been secure for 30 years. It will be secure for 4 more days. Elena thought of Camilla at school right now, moving through her day without knowing that her name had been in the mouth of a man like Victor DeLuca the previous night. She thought of the collected notice on their kitchen counter, the college prep brochure, the headphones Camilla slept with because she was stressed. I'll call her, Elena said. She stepped into the hallway to make the call, and Camilla answered on the third ring with the particular tone of a teenager answering a call from a family member during school hours, alert and pre-alarmed. "What happened?" Camilla said immediately. "Nothing happened. I need you to come somewhere after school today. I need you to pack for a few days." "Elena, it's a precaution. I'll explain when I see you." Elena kept her voice level. "Are you okay right now? Right this second?" "I'm in the hallway at school. I'm fine. You're scaring me." "I know. I'm sorry. Just go back to class, okay? I'll be at the gate at 3. She hung up and stood in the hallway for a moment with her hand on the wall, and then she went back into the study. Lucian was on the phone. Agnes was writing something. Neither of them looked up immediately, and Elena had the strange, untethered feeling of having crossed from one kind of life into another and not being able to see the seam. Then everything she had assumed was the shape of the problem broke open. It happened at 10:47 when Lucian's phone rang. A different phone, a second one he'd had face down on the desk. And he looked at the screen and his expression did something that Elena had not seen it do before. Not controlled, not masked. Something that moved through his face like a current and was gone, but had unmistakably been there. He answered it, listened for 20 seconds, said 3 words. "I understand. When?" And hung up. He looked at Agnes. Agnes read his face, and her own went still. "What?" Elena said. Lucian set the phone down very carefully on the desk. "Victor didn't wait until Thursday," he said. "The gathering had been moved, not 4 days from now. Tonight. 7 o'clock. Victor DeLuca had called it in the last hour, convening the allied families under the pretense of an urgent matter requiring immediate attention. He had spent the morning making calls. By 9 o'clock, before Elena had even arrived at the estate, he had already assembled his case and circulated enough of it that half the families had confirmed attendance. He'd had people at the hotel. He'd already had the photograph. He'd already known what he was going to do with it. The dinner had not been an attempt to reconsider. It had been reconnaissance. "He was never going to give you 4 days," Elena said slowly. "No." Lucian's voice was very quiet. "He wasn't. Which means everything you just told me, the plan, the documentation, we have 9 hours instead of 4 days. Agnes stood up. She moved to the window with the precise, controlled movement of someone recalibrating under pressure, and Elena could see her thinking, not panicking, not freezing, but moving through possibilities with the speed of someone who has done exactly this before and knows which calculations matter. "The documentation we have on Sofia," Agnes said. "Can Moretti present it tonight?" "If I call him in the next 30 minutes. "Call him." Lucian was already picking up the phone. Elena sat with the new shape of things and felt the floor shift under her in a way that wasn't metaphorical. A physical drop in her stomach, the particular nausea of understanding that what she'd agreed to had just been revealed to be something much larger than what she'd been told. Not because Agnes had lied to her, but because Agnes hadn't known the full size of it either. "The family's at the gathering tonight," Elena said. "They're going to hear Victor's version first." "Yes," Agnes said, "and our counter comes second." "Yes, that's a disadvantage." "Yes." Agnes turned from the window. "It is." Elena stood up. She didn't know exactly why she stood up. Some instinct, the same one that had kept her from breaking at the dinner table the night before. "Then we need to be there before him." Agnes looked at her. "If we arrive before Victor does, if we request to speak first," Elena said. She was thinking out loud, which she normally didn't do, but there wasn't time for the alternative. "Is that something you can do? Call whoever organizes these gatherings and request to speak first on grounds that the urgent matter Victor cited directly involves your family?" Agnes and Lucian exchanged a look. "Technically," Lucian said slowly. "Then do it." Elena looked at him. "You present the documentation about Sofia. You make the case about Victor's character and his motives before he has the chance to make the case about mine." A pause. "And I'll be there." "Elena," Agnes started, "I know what you're going to say, that it's dangerous, that Victor will have people there, that the families don't know me and I have no standing in their world." Elena kept her eyes on Lucian. "But you said last night that the documentation doesn't counter his evidence about the engagement, that the only thing that counters it is something real." She stopped. "So let them see something real." Lucian looked at her for a long time. She couldn't read all of it, but she could read some of it. The weight of being someone who has not let himself take anything on trust in 6 years, being asked to take something on trust. "This puts you in a room with Victor," he said, "physically, tonight." "I know." "He threatened your sister." "I know that too." "And you still want to—" "Camilla will be here," Elena said. "You said this house has been secure for 30 years. Her voice didn't waver. 4 walls and security can keep her safe for one evening. What they can't do is fix this if we let Victor go first tonight." Another silence, different from all the others. Lucian picked up his phone and dialed. At 11:23 that morning, Elena called Camilla's school and authorized an early dismissal, citing a family matter. Camilla arrived at the estate at 12:15 in the car Lucian sent, with a backpack over one shoulder and an expression that took in the iron gates and the driveway and the house at the end of it with the careful, measuring look of someone filing everything away. She found Elena in the kitchen. Not the formal kitchen for events, but the back one where Agnes apparently actually cooked, and dropped her backpack on a chair and sat down across from her sister and said, without preamble, "Tell me everything." Elena told her most of it, not the parts that were too dangerous, not the full weight of what Victor DeLuca was capable of, but the arrangement, the dinner, the photograph, the call in the night. Camilla listened to all of it with her hands flat on the table and her face doing the thing their mother's face used to do, the thing that meant she was feeling more than she was showing. When Elena finished, Camilla was quiet for a moment. "You took this for me," she said. "The money, the whole thing." "I took it for us," Elena said. "Don't." Camilla shook her head. "Don't do the US thing. You took it because of the college program and the rent and the electric bill and everything else I pretend I don't know about." Her voice wasn't angry. It was something harder than anger. Clear. "You're allowed to just say that." Elena looked at her sister across the kitchen table and felt something break open behind her sternum that she'd been holding shut for 2 months. "Yeah," she said. "I did." Camilla nodded once, then, "These people, Valenti, are they going to keep you safe tonight?" Elena didn't answer immediately. "Elena." "I don't know," she said. "I think so. I'm choosing to believe so." Camilla looked at her for a long moment with their mother's eyes and their mother's patience and something that was entirely her own. "Okay," she said. "Then go." At 4 o'clock that afternoon, Agnes brought Elena a dress she hadn't been asked for and hadn't expected. Dark, precise, nothing like the midnight blue of the night before. Something that made a different statement. "What does this one say?" Elena asked. "That you are not someone who was surprised by tonight," Agnes said. "That you knew this was coming and you chose to come anyway." Elena looked at the dress for a moment. Then she took it. At 5 o'clock, Lucian knocked on the door of the room they'd given her and opened it without waiting, because apparently knocking and immediately opening was his method of respecting privacy without actually engaging with it. He looked at her standing by the window in the dress. For a moment he didn't say anything. "I need to tell you something," he said, "before tonight." "Okay." He came into the room and stopped a few feet from her, and he had the look she'd started to recognize, the one that preceded something real, something that cost him the energy of producing it. "The gathering tonight," he said. "Victor will not be gentle. He has built this case with the specific intention of destroying every piece of credibility this family has, and you're visible in this. Your name is on it now." "I know." "If this goes wrong, I know. I need you to understand what wrong looks like in this context." "Lucian." She looked at him directly. "I understood what wrong looked like when I picked up the phone at midnight and heard Victor DeLuca's voice. I'm here anyway." He looked at her. The weight of 6 years was visible in his face for a moment. Not performed, not managed. Just there. "Why?" he said. The question was simple and enormous, and he asked it like someone who genuinely couldn't calculate the answer. Elena thought about the hotel bar, about Agnes's envelope and her $14 wine, about Camilla asleep with her headphones in, about a man who visited the graves of people lost because of his family's choices and secretly funded scholarships and kept pieces of his childhood hidden away. "Because someone should," she said. He didn't have an answer for that. She hadn't expected him to. They left for the gathering at 5:45, and the city lights came up through the car windows as they moved through Boston, and Elena sat beside Lucian in the back seat of the car, and looked at the road ahead and understood, with the specific clarity that comes from having no remaining options, that she was no longer the stranger from the bar. She was something else now. She wasn't sure yet what to call it. But Victor DeLuca had made one mistake in all his careful planning. He'd threatened Camilla, and that had taken away the last version of Elena Reyes, who was still deciding whether to fight for it. The sentence finished itself somewhere in the darkness between the estate and the city, and Elena let it settle into her bones and stay there. The car moved through Boston without hurrying. Lucian had said nothing for 20 minutes. He sat beside her with his jacket buttoned and his hands in his lap, and Elena could feel the quality of his silence. Not empty, not comfortable, but dense with something being processed and compressed into whatever shape he needed it to be for the next 2 hours. She didn't try to fill it. At 6:18, he said without looking at her, "When we walk in, stay close." "How close?" "Arm's reach." He paused. "Victor will have people in that room I haven't seen yet. People he's been working quietly for longer than we've known about. I don't know all of them. You're telling me to be careful of who looks friendly. I'm telling you to assume no one in that room is friendly except the people I introduce you to myself." He looked at her then, briefly. "There will be a man named Caruso. Tall, gray jacket. He wears a ring on his right hand that belonged to his father. He is the one person in that room who cannot be bought and has not been managed by Victor. If something goes wrong, if we get separated, you go to Caruso." "How will I know it's him?" "He'll be the only person in the room who looks bored," Lucian said. "He finds these gatherings tedious. He's attended them for 30 years and has never once changed his expression." Elena filed that. "And Moretti, the one presenting the documentation?" "Already there. He arrived an hour ago to set up." Lucian's jaw moved slightly. "He's reliable, old school. He doesn't like Victor." "Why not?" "Victor borrowed money from his cousin in 2019 and never paid it back." A pause that might, in a different context, have been dry humor. Small things make permanent enemies. The car slowed. Outside the window, a building Elena didn't recognize. Older, federal-style architecture. The kind of building that had been repurposed from something official into something that wore its formality like a costume. Lights in the upper floor windows. 2 men near the entrance who were trying to look like they were just standing there and were not succeeding entirely. "This is it?" Elena said. "The Alderton Club," Lucian said. "Neutral ground by agreement. No weapons inside." He looked at the building. "Victor will have people outside." "And you?" "And me." The driver opened the door. The cold hit her immediately, sharper than the night before, a Boston November cold that had found its edge. Elena stepped out and Lucian was beside her in 2 seconds, not taking her arm, just present, close enough that the warmth of him was a physical thing against the cold air. She heard the door of the building open before they'd reached the steps. The man who came out was not someone she recognized. Medium height, dark coat, mid-50s, with the kind of face that had seen too much and had stopped reacting to most of it. He looked at Lucian and then at Elena, and his eyes were calculating without being hostile. "Caruso," Lucian said. Elena looked at him. He was not wearing a gray jacket, he was wearing a dark navy one, and he looked less bored than watchful, but she registered the ring on his right hand and understood that the gray jacket had probably been an approximation. "He's already inside," Caruso said. He said it quietly, with the economy of a man who does not waste words outdoors when walls are available. "Brought 4 people with him. 2 I know, 2 I don't." "Who does he have?" "Bertelli, Marchetti's son-in-law." Caruso paused. "And someone I've never seen before at these things. Young, quiet. Stood by the east wall when I came out." Lucian absorbed that. "Position?" "East wall has the room's only secondary exit." Neither of them said anything for a moment, and Elena understood the thing they were not saying out loud, which was that the unknown young man standing by the only secondary exit was probably not there for the canapes. "Moretti's ready," Caruso said. "Documents?" "Physical copies to every family head before Victor speaks. Digital version to follow if anyone disputes the originals." Caruso's eyes moved to Elena. "She's going in?" "Yes," Lucian said. Caruso looked at her for exactly 3 seconds, with the assessing look of a man who has evaluated people in difficult situations for decades. Then he looked back at Lucian. She holds up? She held up last night, Lucian said, with Victor across the table and a surveillance photograph on the tablecloth. Caruso nodded once, with the minimal approval of someone who operates on small gestures. Then we go. The inside of the Alderton Club was quieter than Elena expected, muffled, the way old buildings with heavy walls muffle things, as if the architecture itself were maintaining discretion. A foyer with dark wood paneling, a staircase with a brass rail. Men in good suits having conversations that stopped when the three of them walked in. Elena felt every set of eyes in the room calculate her presence. She kept her chin level and her pace even and breathed through it. The gathering room was on the second floor, a long rectangular space with a conference table that seated 20 and chairs along the walls for additional attendees. Maybe 30 people in the room already, and the temperature of it was not neutral. There was something loaded in the air, the particular electricity of a room full of people who have been told something privately and are waiting to see it confirmed publicly. Victor DeLuca was standing at the far end of the table. He saw Lucian the moment they came through the door. His expression did not change, not 1 degree. The fixed smile was in place, and his posture was perfectly composed, and he looked across the room at Lucian with the settled confidence of someone who arrived at a card game knowing what cards everyone else was holding. Then his eyes moved to Elena. A flicker. Just one. Very fast. He hadn't expected her to be here. That was the first thing that had not gone according to his plan, and Elena felt it land in her chest like a small, fierce warmth. Lucian moved to the table. Elena stayed at arm's reach as instructed, and Caruso positioned himself somewhere in her peripheral vision without making it visible. The room continued its conversations, but they were quieter now, shorter. People finishing sentences rather than starting new ones. A man at the head of the table, older, heavy-set, with the bearing of someone who has been the authority in rooms like this one for a long time, looked at Lucian and said, "Valenti, we weren't expecting you until 7. "We requested early time," Lucian said. "I believe that was confirmed." The man, Elena would later learn his name was Ferrano, the closest thing this particular gathering had to a chair, looked between Lucian and Victor at the other end of the table with the expression of a man who can feel a headache developing. It was confirmed. "Victor, you're aware the Valentis have requested to speak first." Victor's smile didn't waver. "Of course," he gestured expansively. "Please, I'm a patient man." He wasn't, but it cost him nothing to perform it. Lucian sat down at the table. Elena sat beside him. Moretti, across the room, caught Lucian's eye with the minimal nod of a man on a mark. Ferrano called the room to order at 6:31. Lucian spoke for 11 minutes. He was not theatrical about it. He did not raise his voice. He presented the documentation about Victor DeLuca and Sofia Carano in the measured, factual cadence of someone who has prepared for exactly this and does not need to perform outrage because the facts perform it adequately on their own. He laid out the timeline, the dates, the communications, the financial transaction that cleared the Carano family's debt in exchange for 11 months of information passed to the Rossi operation. He referenced the source of the documentation without naming the source, in the particular way that told everyone present the source was credible and had their own reasons for staying anonymous. Moretti distributed physical copies to every family head at the table simultaneously, with the smooth timing of someone who has coordinated document distribution in high-stakes rooms before. The room was very quiet. Victor's smile had not changed. His posture had not changed. Elena watched him from her position beside Lucian and saw the only tell, his right hand, which had been resting on the table, moved to his lap at the 4-minute mark and did not come back. When Lucian finished, Ferrano looked at Victor. "Victor." "An impressive presentation," Victor said. His voice was even, warm almost. "Clearly prepared with a great deal of effort." He paused, looking around the table. "I'd like to ask a simple question before I respond." He looked at Elena. "Who is this woman?" The room waited. "Elena Reyes," Lucian said, "my fiancée. She's here because what Victor intends to present tonight involves her directly, and she has the right to be present for it." "Fiancée," Victor repeated like he was tasting the word and finding it interesting. "Yes, that's actually exactly what I'd like to talk about." He reached into his jacket, slowly, deliberately, with the theatrical patience of someone saving the best for last, and produced his phone. He didn't put it on the table this time. He connected it to the room's display screen at the wall. The photograph from the hotel appeared, larger than it had been on the small screen at dinner, clearer. Agnes and Elena outside the Harrington, the envelope visible, the timestamp on the image file reading 11:47 p.m. the night before the dinner. "I want to be straightforward," Victor said. He was speaking to the room now, not to Lucian, which was a specific choice. "I have deep respect for the Valenti family, for Agnes, for the legacy of Marco Valenti before his passing. What I'm about to share is not motivated by hostility. It is motivated by what I believe every family in this room deserves, which is honesty." He was good. Elena had known he was good. But watching him perform reasonableness in front of 30 people who were already inclined to hear him out because he'd spent weeks managing the temperature of the room in advance, watching it work in real time was something different. "This photograph was taken 11:47 p.m., 2 nights ago," Victor said. "The woman you see with Agnes Valenti is Elena Reyes, introduced to us the following evening as Lucian's fiancée." He looked at Elena directly. "Ms. Reyes, how long had you known the Valenti family before this photograph was taken?" The room turned to her. Elena felt 30 pairs of eyes adjust in her direction, and she felt the weight of it, not as threat, but as a specific kind of pressure, the kind that finds every crack in your surface and presses. Her heartbeat was elevated. She could feel it at the base of her throat. She looked at Victor. "That's not the question you actually want to ask," she said. Something shifted in the room, small but present. Victor's smile held. "I'm sorry?" "You want to ask whether this engagement is real," Elena said. Her voice was steady. She was very deliberately not letting it be anything else. "That's the question you've been building toward, so ask it." A beat of silence. "All right," Victor said pleasantly. "Is this engagement real?" "Define real," Elena said. "I think the definition is fairly standard." "Is it?" She looked around the table. Not performing, just meeting eyes, the way she'd learned to do in every high-stakes client meeting where she'd walked in without the right credentials and had to make the room decide she belonged anyway. Real meaning it started in a conventional way? No, it didn't. Agnes approached me, we had a conversation, I agreed to attend a dinner. That's accurate, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. She paused. But you didn't call this gathering to have a conversation about how relationships start. You called it because you've spent 2 years trying to position your daughter beside Lucian Valenti, and the existence of anyone else in that position threatens the plan you built on a betrayal. You've spent 8 years hoping no one would trace back to you. The room made a sound that wasn't quite sound, more a collective adjustment, a shift in the atmospheric pressure. Victor's smile was still there, but it had changed underneath. The pleasantness had gone thin. "That's a serious accusation," he said. "The documentation Lucian presented is a serious response to a serious crime," Elena said. "Sofia Carano was a person. She was 26 years old, and you recruited her and used her, and the consequences of what you put in motion cost people more than you've ever accounted for." She kept her voice level, not angry, clear. "The photograph on that screen is real. The conversation between me and Agnes happened. And it happened because Agnes Valenti is a mother who has watched her son spend 6 years not trusting anyone, not opening anything, not letting anyone in because of what you did." She looked at Victor. "So yes, I came to a dinner, and you can present that photograph to every family in Boston if you want to. But I'd ask them to look at it next to the documentation about Sofia and tell me which one is more deserving of this room's attention." Silence. Not the loaded silence from earlier. Something different, something that had changed temperature. Verano was looking at his copy of the documentation. Another man down the table, Bertelli, the one Caruso had named as Victor's, was looking at his copy too, with an expression that was doing something complicated. Victor stepped forward. His voice lost the warmth. "You are a woman who was paid to perform a role in this family for a single evening. And you are standing in this room making accusations about my character based on a briefing you received 48 hours ago. You have no standing here. You have no history here. You have—" "She has more standing here than you do," Lucian's voice cut across the room. Everything stopped. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't stood up. He was sitting at the table with his hands flat on the surface and his face completely composed. And he said it the way you say something that is simply true, without heat, without performance. She walked into my house and told me exactly who she was and what she was doing there, Lucian said. She sat across a dinner table from you while you had surveillance photographs of her in your pocket, and she didn't break. He looked at Victor steadily. You want to talk about authenticity in this room. You want to talk about what's real and what's manufactured. A pause. You manufactured a betrayal that cost my family 2 years of operations and cost me. He stopped. He stopped for just a moment, and in that moment something passed across his face that was not controlled, not masked. It was there and it was human, and the room saw it. You want to know what's real, Victor? What's real is that she's here. She didn't have to be. She was threatened. You called her at midnight, and you threatened her sister, which I'd like this room to be aware of. And she's here anyway. He let that sit. What are you here for? Victor's jaw was tight now. The fixed smile was gone. This isn't over, Victor said. Actually, Verano said quietly, from the head of the table, I think for tonight it is. Victor turned to Verano. The documentation they've presented is going to be reviewed, Verano said, by me and by others in this room, independently, before any decisions are made. He set his copy down on the table with the particular finality of a man who runs meetings and knows when they have reached their natural end. Victor, I've known you for 20 years. I'd like the opportunity to assess what I'm looking at before I speak further. He looked at Lucian. Same applies. Lucian nodded. Victor looked around the room, reading it, calculating it, looking for the faces that were still with him, finding fewer of them than he'd arrived expecting. He looked at Elena last. It was not the smile this time. It was something underneath the smile, the thing the smile had been sitting on top of for the entire evening, and it was cold and specific, and it told her that this room was not the end of it. She held his gaze. He turned and walked toward the door. He didn't look back. The room exhaled. Not all at once, gradually, in clusters, as people began speaking in low voices to the person nearest them, and the collective tension began to redistribute into something more manageable. Caruso appeared at Elena's elbow and said, very quietly, "Good," which from him she gathered was significant. Lucian was speaking with Verano in low tones. Elena stood slightly back, and the adrenaline was still moving through her system. She could feel it in her hands, a faint unsteadiness she was controlling by keeping them still. Her chest was tight, her throat was dry. She thought about what Lucian had said. She was threatened. You called her at midnight, and you threatened her sister, which I'd like this room to be aware of. And she's here anyway. He had said that in front of 30 people. He had said it on purpose, specifically with the weight he'd given it. He had named what Victor had done to her, publicly, in a room full of people whose opinion Victor needed. She didn't know what to do with that. At 8:15 they were back in the car. Moretti had stayed behind with Caruso. The building behind them was still lit. Lucian sat beside her and said nothing for a long time. Verano's going to review the documentation, he said finally. I know. It'll take days, maybe a week. During that time, Victor will be working to counter it. He paused. This isn't finished. I know that too. Elena. She looked at him. He was looking at her with the look she couldn't fully categorize. The one from the dinner table, the one from the study, the one that kept appearing in the gaps between everything else. In the moments when the architecture of control he maintained over his own face had a brief fault line. You didn't have to say what you said in there, he said. Someone had to say it. That's what you said this afternoon too. He held her gaze. You keep doing things because someone has to. Doesn't someone have to? He looked at her for a moment. Then something in his expression shifted. Not the controlled shift of someone managing how they appear, but the involuntary kind. The kind that happens before the management catches up. Are you all right? He said. The question was so simple, so direct. It came without any of the architecture around it, without the distance he'd been maintaining, and Elena felt it hit somewhere she hadn't left open. Ask me in an hour, she said. He almost smiled. The corner of his mouth moved barely, and then his phone rang and the moment closed. He answered it. His expression changed immediately, sharp, alert, and Elena watched him listen for 10 seconds and say, when? Then he was looking at the driver. Take us to the harbor. What's happened? Elena said. Victor left the Alderton Club and went directly to a warehouse on the waterfront that belongs to a shell company connected to the Rossi operation. Lucian's voice was back to its operational flatness, each word a tool. The same Rossi operation he was feeding information to 8 years ago through Sophia. Elena's stomach dropped. He went there tonight, she said, after the meeting. Within 30 minutes of leaving it. Lucian looked at her. Which means he had a contingency, something prepared in advance in case tonight didn't go his way. He paused. And that contingency required a trip to a Rossi warehouse. What's in the warehouse? He didn't answer immediately. The car was moving faster now, threading through evening traffic. Lucian. Her voice was sharp. What's in the warehouse? He looked at her with an expression that was doing something she hadn't seen before. Not just controlled, but tight, as if something beneath it was pressing hard against the surface. I don't know yet, he said. But his contingency involved something he needed to activate immediately after losing ground tonight, something that couldn't wait. He looked out the window. Victor DeLuca doesn't panic. He prepares. Whatever is in that warehouse was always part of the plan. A beat. We need to know what it is before he uses it. The car reached the waterfront at 8:47. The harbor was dark, industrial. The part of Boston that isn't in any photograph, all chain link and sodium light, and the smell of salt water and diesel. The warehouse sat back from the dock, a flat-roofed rectangle with 2 loading doors and a single lit window on the upper level. 2 cars were parked outside. Victor's, Elena recognized. The second one, she didn't. Stay in the car, Lucian said. Lucian, I mean it. He was looking at the warehouse with his jaw set. Caruso is 3 minutes behind us. You stay in this car until he arrives. And then? And then you do whatever Caruso says. He looked at her. Please. That last word, the way it came out, unguarded, just slightly, landed somewhere. She nodded. He got out of the car. She watched him cross the 40 yards to the warehouse with the deliberate pace of someone who has done this before and knows that rushing communicates fear. And the 2 men near the loading door saw him coming, and something passed between them, and one of them made a movement toward his coat that stopped when Lucian said something Elena couldn't hear through the glass. Then he was inside. The warehouse door closed behind him. Elena sat in the car and counted. She did it because it was something to do with her brain, while the rest of her was operating on a frequency she didn't have a name for. Not fear exactly, something more sustained than fear. Her hands were in her lap, and she was breathing carefully, evenly, the way she'd learned to breathe in bad moments. 40 seconds. 80. Caruso's car appeared at the end of the dock road. At the same moment, her phone rang. She looked at the screen. Camilla. She answered immediately. Hey, are you okay? I'm fine. Camilla's voice was off, just slightly. I'm at the house. There's someone here who says he's from your family? Elena's body went cold. Someone where? She said. At the estate. He came to the gate. He said he knew you. He said you'd sent him. Elena, the security people let him in because he had a name. He said he was Camilla. Elena's voice was very controlled. Where are you right now? What room? The kitchen. The security man said I should wait in the kitchen. Elena, what is? Listen to me. Elena's hand was already on the car door. Go to the room Agnes showed you, the one with the lock. Go now. Don't open the door for anyone until I call you back from this number. Do you understand me? Yes, but go, right now. I'll call you in 5 minutes. She ended the call and she was out of the car before she'd finished the thought, and Caruso was stepping out of his own car 20 feet away, and she was already moving toward him. The estate, she said. Someone got into the estate. Caruso's face did nothing but his eyes sharpened by a degree. How? I don't know. He had a name. Security let him through. She was controlling her breathing, but it was harder now. Camilla is in there. Caruso pulled out his phone. Inside the warehouse, somewhere behind the flat metal door, something made a sound. Not loud. Just present. Single thud, the kind that doesn't have a clean explanation. Elena looked at the warehouse door. She looked at Caruso on his phone. She looked at the warehouse door again. Victor DeLuca had spent 8 years planning. He had prepared for tonight. He had prepared a contingency for losing tonight. He had brought Lucian to a waterfront warehouse, and he had sent someone to the estate where Camilla was. And the shape of it, the terrible, elegant shape of it, was becoming visible now. And what it said was that this had never been about the gathering, never been about the documentation, or the photograph, or the families, or any of it. It had been about separating Lucian from everything that mattered, and Elena from the one thing she couldn't afford to lose. She was already moving toward the warehouse door when Caruso caught her arm. "Don't," he said. "Someone is in there with him, and someone else is at the estate with my sister." Her voice came out level, which surprised her because nothing inside her was level. "I'm not standing on a dock. You go through that door without knowing what's on the other side, you become a liability instead of an asset." Caruso's grip was firm but not rough. His eyes were steady. "Give me 60 seconds. He was already on his radio with his other hand. Low, fast words she couldn't fully parse. She stood in the sodium light and counted the seconds the same way she'd counted them in the car, and the harbor smell was sharp in her throat, and the single-lit window on the upper level of the warehouse threw a rectangle of yellow light onto the dock that didn't reach where she was standing. At 40 seconds, the warehouse door opened. Lucian came through it. He was moving fast, not running, but close to it, and Elena's first read of him, jacket still on, upright, no visible damage, lasted about 2 seconds before she saw his left hand, which he was holding slightly away from his body with the particular careful stillness of someone managing pain. He saw her outside the car, and his face did something complicated. "I told you to stay in the car," he said. "Camilla called." She moved toward him. Someone got into the estate. A man at the gate. He had a name. Security let him through. Lucian stopped walking. "What name?" he said. "She didn't tell me. I got her to the safe room before." "What name did he use?" His voice had changed, not louder, colder, in the particular way that meant something had just connected with something else, and the result was not good. Caruso said, from behind Elena, "Rossini." Lucian looked at him. "That's the name he'd have used," Caruso said. "Rossini is the contact name for the Valenti estate service contractors. Victor would have had it through Sophia." He paused. 8-year-old information that your security team never thought to retire because it was never used against you. Sophia again. 8 years later, the damage still producing consequences like a stone dropped into still water, still making rings. Lucian's jaw was tight. He looked at his hand, looked at it with the brief, assessing look of someone deciding whether it requires attention now or later, and made the decision that it was later. "Get to the estate," he said to Caruso. "Already moving." Caruso was at his car. "My people are 4 minutes out from the gate." "I'm coming," Elena said. Neither of them argued with her this time. The drive back to the estate was 17 minutes. Elena knew because she watched the clock on the car's dashboard with the focused attention of someone who needs a number to hold on to while everything else is moving too fast. Lucian was on the phone for the first 9 minutes. Short, operational calls, the kind that produced action rather than conversation. His left hand rested on his knee, and she could see now in the car's interior light that the knuckles were split. Not badly, but split. She didn't ask what had happened in the warehouse. He'd tell her or he wouldn't, and right now that was not the urgent thing. At minute 10, he put the phone down and was quiet, and at minute 11, Elena said, "What was in the warehouse?" He looked at the window for a moment. Victor wasn't there. He'd already left. But he'd left instructions, a meeting, prearranged with 2 men from the Rossi operation. Settling something. He paused. They were there to receive documentation about our operations, about our current structure. He looked at his hand. "I interrupted the transfer." "The contingency." "Yes." "He was going to the Rossi family," Elena said slowly. "Not the allied families. If the gathering didn't work, if the documentation against him got out, he had a secondary move. Pass current intelligence about your operations directly to your enemies and let them handle the problem." "Yes." "He was going to get you killed." Lucian looked at her. "He was going to try." She looked at his hand. "The men in the warehouse are no longer a problem." She didn't ask for more than that. She understood the shape of it, and she did not need the details. And Lucian understood that she understood, and between them that was enough. At minute 14, she said, "Your hand." "I know. It needs to be looked at." "I know that too." "After Camilla," she said. "After Camilla," he agreed. The estate gate came into view. Two of Caruso's cars were already there, the gates open. Lucian's driver went through without stopping and up the driveway faster than the first time Elena had come this way, 4 days ago, in a different life with a different understanding of what she was walking into. The front door was open. Agnes was in the entrance hall. Elena saw her from the car, and the sight of Agnes standing there, upright, present, composed in the particular way that costs something to maintain, released something in her chest that had been clenched for the past 40 minutes. She was out of the car before it fully stopped and through the door, and Agnes met her with both hands on her arms, a brief, firm grip. "Camilla is in the safe room," Agnes said. "She's all right. The man who entered is contained." "Contained meaning? Meaning he is in the East Wing with 2 of our people and he is not going anywhere." Agnes looked at Elena steadily. "Your sister is frightened, but she is not hurt. Not one hair."
Elena breathed. It came out uneven, and she didn't try to make it otherwise. "I need to see her," Elena said. "Second floor, east corridor, the room with the blue door." Agnes paused, and her eyes moved to Lucian behind Elena, and the look that passed between them was brief and complete, and contained more than Elena could parse. "Go, both of you. The rest can wait." The blue door was locked from the inside. Elena knocked and said, "It's me. It's Elena." And there was a pause, and then the sound of the lock turning, and the door opened, and Camilla was standing there with her arms crossed over her chest and her eyes slightly red at the edges. And she looked at Elena and said absolutely nothing for 3 seconds, and then unfolded her arms and grabbed her sister with the particular fierceness of someone who has been frightened alone and is now done being alone. Elena held on. She held on longer than she usually let herself hold on, which was not usually very long because she was normally the one who had to hold it together, and holding on didn't help you hold it together. But she held on now and felt her sister's shoulders and her sister's breathing and the particular smell of Camilla's shampoo, and she let herself just be a person who was relieved rather than a person who was managing the relief. Behind her, she heard Lucian step back from the doorway. The quiet deliberateness of it, the conscious step back, giving them the space, not filling it, said something she noticed and stored. After a while, Camilla pulled back. She looked at Elena's face the way she always looked at it, reading things Elena hadn't said. Then she looked past Elena to where Lucian was standing in the corridor. She looked at him for a moment. "You brought her back," Camilla said. Not a question. "She didn't require much bringing," Lucian said. Camilla looked at him for 3 more seconds with their mother's assessing patience. Then she looked at his hand. "You're bleeding on the carpet." He looked down. He was, slightly. "My apologies. There's a first aid kit in the bathroom." Camilla said it the way she said most things, direct, no ceremony, and then stepped back from the doorway. "Both of you come in." Elena looked at Lucian. He looked at the doorway with the expression of a man being invited into something he didn't have an immediate framework for. Then he came in. The room was small and simply furnished, a bed, a desk, a bathroom off the side. Camilla sat on the edge of the bed, and Elena sat in the desk chair, and Lucian stood with his back to the wall and let Camilla direct him through the bathroom doorway to the first aid kit with the matter-of-fact authority of a 17-year-old who had been managing things because someone had to. Elena heard her sister's voice from the bathroom, low and practical, and Lucian's single-word responses, and she sat in the desk chair and let the adrenaline finish moving through her system and looked at the blue door and understood that tonight was essentially over. The hard version of it, anyway. The man who'd entered the estate was a low-level courier connected to Victor's operation. Not a threat in the physical sense, more a probe. Testing the perimeter, seeing if access was possible. He'd been stopped in the east corridor before reaching the residential wing, and he had, under conversation with Caruso's people, confirmed what they'd already suspected. Victor had sent him simultaneously with the warehouse meeting, 2 contingencies running at once. If the warehouse transfer succeeded, the man at the estate was irrelevant. If it didn't, the man at the estate was meant to extract something. Not a person, Caruso confirmed later, but information. Files Agnes kept in the estate's study. Operational documents. Victor DeLuca had been building fail-safes on top of fail-safes for 8 years, and tonight, all of them had failed. What happened next took 3 days. Ferrano and 2 other family heads completed their review of the documentation regarding Sofia Carano. On the second day, Ferrano called Lucian.
On the third day, he called Victor. Elena was at the estate for all 3 days. She had gone back to Alston once, on the morning of the second day, to get clothes for herself and Camilla, and the apartment had felt strange, smaller than she remembered, like a room from a version of her life she was visiting rather than living in. She'd stood in her kitchen for 5 minutes looking at the collections notice still on the counter, and the college prep brochure still on the table, and the ordinary, held-together mess of her life as it had been a week ago. Then she'd packed 2 bags and gone back to the estate. She and Lucian had barely been alone together during those 3 days. The estate had been full. Caruso and his people, Moretti, Agnes managing the logistics of Ferrano's review with the efficiency of someone who has run complicated operations for 40 years. Elena had found her role in it not as a central actor, but as something quieter and perhaps more useful. She was good at reading rooms, good at knowing when someone needed information repeated differently, or when a conversation had reached its limit and needed to stop. She had done those things without being asked to, because they were what the situation required, and because she had spent 4 years planning events, and the core skill of event planning is exactly that, seeing what a room needs before the room knows it needs it. Agnes had watched her do it, had said nothing, but she'd watched. On the evening of the third day, after Ferrano's call to Victor, Lucian found Elena in the small sitting room off the kitchen. Not the formal one, the back one, where Agnes apparently went when she wanted to think without the weight of the house's main rooms. Elena had found it by accident on the first day and had been going back to it, and she was sitting in the chair by the window with a cup of tea. A cup of tea she wasn't drinking when Lucian knocked on the frame of the open door. She looked up. He came in and sat down across from her, and he was in civilian clothes, dark trousers, a gray sweater, no jacket, which was the first time she'd seen him without the armor of a jacket in daylight, and he looked tired in the way he'd looked tired at the beginning, the deep kind, but the quality of it had changed, less compressed, like something that had been held under pressure for a long time had been released slightly. He told her what Ferrano had said. Victor De Luca would withdraw from the Allied network, not expelled. That would create a war none of the families wanted, but effectively isolated. His access to shared operations, shared information, shared protection would be suspended pending what Ferrano called a full accounting, which both of them understood was a procedural way of saying Victor would be managed out over a period of months, until his influence had reduced to the point of irrelevance. "Is that enough?" Elena asked. Lucian was quiet for a moment. "No," he said. "Not really. Not for what he did." He looked at his hands, which were folded in his lap, the left one with a small strip of bandage over the knuckles that Camilla had applied with the no-nonsense competence that apparently ran in the Reyes family. "But it's what's possible without starting something that would cost more than he's worth." Elena understood that. She didn't like it entirely, but she understood it. "Sophia," she said. "What happens about Sophia?" "The documentation goes to her family. What they do with it, whether they confront Victor, whether they pursue anything, is their decision." His voice was careful. "I spent 6 years believing she'd made a choice, that she'd looked at me and seen something she could use." He stopped. "She was 23 when Victor approached her. Her family owed money they couldn't pay. He offered her a way out." "He gave her an impossible choice," Elena said. "Yes." He was quiet. "That doesn't make what she did without consequence, but it changes the weight of it." He looked at the window. "I was angry at the wrong person for a long time, or not only at the right one." Elena held her teacup. Outside, the November dark had come down early, and the estate's grounds lights had come up, casting that familiar orange warmth across the driveway. "Lucian," she said. He looked at her. "What happens now?" She said it simply out hedging. "The arrangement. It was one dinner. That's what we agreed to. The dinner was a week ago, and I'm still here, and my sister is upstairs doing homework at a desk in your house, and I don't know what the shape of this is supposed to be." He held her gaze. He didn't look away, didn't manage it, didn't deflect into logistics. "I don't know either," he said. "That's an honest answer." "I know it is." "What I know," he said slowly, like someone choosing words from a limited supply that matters, "is that I've spent 6 years in this house deciding that the perimeter of what I'm willing to trust gets smaller every year, and that it was working, in the way that surviving works. It kept things from breaking. It also kept everything from growing. He paused. I don't know what this is. I know that I don't want you to leave because the arrangement technically concluded. Elena looked at him. He was not a man who said things like that easily. She could see what it cost him, not as performance, but as simple visible fact, the way effort shows on a face whether or not you want it to. Your mother, Elena said, asked me 3 days ago whether what existed between us was still manufactured. I know, she told me. What did you tell her? I told her it was a complicated question. A pause. She told me complicated questions are just simple questions that people are afraid to answer. Elena almost smiled. That sounds like her. It does, he agreed. They were quiet for a moment. I'm not easy, Lucian said. I want to be honest about that. I have spent a long time being not easy, and it is not something that resolves overnight because circumstances changed. I didn't walk into a hotel bar 6 days ago looking for easy, Elena said. I was looking for a way to pay my rent and keep my sister in her life. Easy wasn't in the requirements. The $20,000, he said. I want to... Don't make it about the money, she said. Not harshly, just directly. That was the beginning. It's not the middle. Don't reduce it. He looked at her. No, he said. You're right. She set down her teacup. Here's what I know, she said. I know that I went into a room with 30 powerful people and I wasn't afraid of them. I know that when your name was under attack, I found that I was not willing to sit quietly while it happened. I know that when I thought you were in that warehouse and something was wrong, my first instinct was not to stay in the car. She met his eyes. I know that I've been sitting in this room for an hour because it's the room in this house where I can think clearly, which tells me something about what this house is becoming to me. She paused. And I know that the first night, in that bar, your mother looked at me and said she needed someone impossible to control. She tilted her head slightly. I think that's still true. If that's a problem, it's not a problem, he said. Good, Elena said, because it's not changing. He looked at her for a long moment, with the look she'd stopped trying to categorize because it didn't fit any category she'd had before him. It was the look of someone seeing something they'd stopped believing existed and not yet having the framework to be certain of what they're seeing, but looking anyway. Then he said, stay. One word, unadorned. She looked at him. For how long? I don't know, he said. I'd like to find out. She thought about her apartment in Alston, the collection's notice, the iron that stuck, the $14 wine she'd almost walked away from, the night a woman in an expensive coat sat down beside her and said, that wine is not worth $14. She thought about what that night had cost her and what it had returned, and how those two things were not in balance in any way she could calculate, but were also not the right framework for understanding what had happened. She thought about Camilla upstairs doing homework. Camilla, who had looked at Lucian and said you brought her back and had given him a first aid kit and directed him with 17-year-old matter-of-fact authority, and who was, Elena knew, going to be fine. Who had always been going to be fine because she was their mother's daughter, and she had been built for more than survival. I'll stay through the end of the week, Elena said. Then I need to go back to the apartment, deal with the rent, start the process of rebuilding my practice. He nodded. But I'll come back, she said. Something in his face settled. Not relief exactly. Something more contained than relief. Something that had been waiting for a long time and had finally been given permission to be still. All right, he said. Agnes appeared in the doorway. She stood there for a moment looking at the two of them in the back sitting room with their tea and their conversation and whatever was visible in the room that Elena couldn't see from inside it. And Agnes's face did the thing it had done in the hotel bar. The thing that was not quite a smile and not quite sadness. The thing that didn't have a clean name. Moretti is leaving, she said. He wants to say goodbye. Lucian stood. He looked at Elena once more, briefly, and then followed his mother out of the room. Elena sat alone for a moment. She looked at the window and the orange lights on the driveway. She thought about her mother, who had stood in kitchens very different from this one, and had still, somehow, made them feel like a place where things could be figured out. She thought about the specific shape of her mother's hands, and the way she'd held coffee cups, and the way she'd said, "You're going to be fine, mija," with the complete certainty of someone who knew things in advance. She thought, I think I'm going to be fine. Not because everything was resolved, not because the path forward was clear or easy or uncomplicated,
but because she had walked into a room with nothing except herself and she had not broken, and she had found, in the wreckage of what she'd thought was her life's lowest point, something she hadn't expected to find. Not money, not security, though those were real and necessary. Something harder to name and therefore more worth keeping. 3 weeks later, Elena signed a lease on a small office space in the South End for her event planning practice. She signed it alone, on a Tuesday morning, with a pen she'd borrowed from the building manager and forgotten to return.
The space smelled like fresh paint and needed new overhead lights, and the window looked out onto a side street where a restaurant was receiving a delivery and a woman was arguing pleasantly with a parking meter. She stood in the empty room for a while. Then she took out her phone and called Camilla, who answered on the second ring. "Did you get it?" Camilla said. "Signed this morning. Finally." She could hear her sister's smile through the phone. "Can I come see it after school?" "Bring food," Elena said. "There's nothing in this neighborhood I can afford for lunch yet." "You are a small business owner now," Camilla said. "Act like it." "I will act like it in 30 days when the first check clears." Camilla laughed, a real laugh, the full one, the one that sounded like their mother, and said she'd be there at 3:30, and they hung up, and Elena stood in her empty office in the November light and felt, for the first time in a long time, the particular sensation of being exactly where she was supposed to be. Lucian came by at 6. He didn't make an occasion of it. He knocked on the open door of the office, which she'd left open while she measured windows, and he stood in the doorway in his jacket with his hands in his pockets and looked around the space with the careful assessment he gave most things. "It needs lights," he said. "I know. I know someone who does commercial electrical work." "I have someone," she said. She looked up at him. "Don't fix things I haven't asked you to fix." "Noted." He came into the room, looked at the window. "It's a good location. It's a reasonable location. It'll be a good location in 2 years." "You sound certain." "I've built things before," she said. "I know how long it takes." He nodded slowly. "I was looking at the street through the window, and Elena watched his profile and thought about the first night she'd seen him. The cold, controlled man in the doorway of the sitting room who'd said no to his mother with the exhausted certainty of someone who had been saying no to everything for years. He was still controlled. That wasn't going to change, and she didn't expect it to. But the quality of the control had shifted, less like a wall and more like something structural, the kind that holds things up rather than the kind that keeps things out. "I told Ferrano about Sofia," he said, "the full account, what she was offered, how it was structured." He paused. "He's going to ensure her family is aware that the debt Victor cleared on her behalf is considered paid, that there's no further obligation." He kept his eyes on the window. "It doesn't undo anything, but it closes something that should have been closed 8 years ago." Elena set down her measuring tape. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Closing it." He considered the question with the seriousness he gave questions he wasn't going to answer carelessly. "Emptier than I expected," he said. "I've been carrying it for a long time. Things you carry for a long time leave a space when you set them down." "What goes in the space?" she asked. He looked at her then. "I'm working on that," he said. She looked back at him in her empty office with its bare windows and its paint smell and its view of a side street in the South End, and she thought about hotel bars and envelopes and photographs on dinner tables and warehouse docks and a blue door with a lock and a woman who proposed something impossible at 11:17 on a rainy Tuesday night. She thought about how the worst night of her life had been a Tuesday. She thought about how this was also a Tuesday. "Stay for dinner," she said. "There's a place 2 blocks over that Camilla claims is decent." Camilla's standard for decent is exacting, I know. Elena picked up her measuring tape from the floor. "She specifically approved this restaurant. That means something." He almost smiled. The corner of his mouth moved in the way she'd come to know. The small version, the one that wasn't performed. "All right," he said. They left the office together, and Elena locked the door behind her and looked at the lock for a moment. Her lock, her door, her space. With the quiet satisfaction of someone who has built something from a standing start and knows the weight of what that means. Outside, the November air had its edge, the kind that had been there the night she sat in the Harrington bar with cheap wine and a resume folder and no clear sense of what came next. She'd figured it out anyway. She usually did. Lucian walked beside her, and they went 2 blocks through the South End in the evening light, and it was not a romantic movie version of walking through a city.
They argued mildly about directions for half a block because he had a different instinct about which way was shorter, and he was wrong, and she told him he was wrong, and he did not concede this gracefully. And it was that, specifically, the mild argument about directions and the graceless non-concession, that made Elena understand she wasn't performing anything anymore. Hadn't been, maybe, for longer than she'd admitted to herself. At the restaurant, Camilla was already there, somehow, sitting at a corner table with her phone and a bread basket she'd made significant progress on. She looked up when they came in. She looked at the two of them. She picked up a piece of bread and said, "I ordered for everyone, hope that's fine." "It's fine," Elena said. "It's presumptuous," Lucian said. "It's efficient," Camilla said. "There's a difference." Elena sat down. Lucian sat across from her. Camilla was already talking about something else. The college prep program's spring schedule, a problem with a classmate's study group, the particular injustice of a teacher who'd assigned reading over Thanksgiving, and her voice filled the table the way their mother's voice used to fill rooms, with the warmth of someone who takes up exactly as much space as they deserve and doesn't apologize for it. Elena listened. She ate bread. She looked at Lucian once, across the table, and he looked back at her, and neither of them said anything about it, and neither of them needed to. It was not a perfect ending. Victor DeLuca was diminished, but not destroyed, and the world he operated in did not produce clean endings, only new arrangements. The allied families would watch and wait and assess, the way they always had. Agnes would continue to manage things that didn't get managed cleanly, because that was the nature of the life. Lucian's walls would come down slowly and not in straight lines, and there would be days when they went back up, because that's what happens to things built over 6 years of real pain. Elena's practice would have good months and bad ones. The overhead lights in the South End office would take 3 weeks to install because her electrical contact had a full schedule, not Lucian's. Camilla would get into her college prep program and then into a college that made Agnes reach for her reading glasses to look at the acceptance letter, and then quietly, without fanfare, arrange for something that would ensure the financial piece didn't become a problem, and Elena would accept this only after a conversation that lasted 40 minutes and covered the difference between help and charity, and they would reach an agreement about the distinction. These were the things that came after. But in the restaurant in the South End on a Tuesday in November, with bread on the table and Camilla's voice covering the silence and Boston doing its Boston thing outside the windows, gray and particular and stubbornly itself, Elena Reyes sat across from a man who had spent 6 years building walls and had started, carefully, brick by careful brick, to let her near them. She thought about a woman in an expensive coat at a hotel bar. She thought about a whispered request. Act like my son's fiancée. She had walked in as a stranger with a grocery receipt full of notes she'd burned in a kitchen sink. She was leaving as something else. She still didn't have a clean word for it. But then, the things worth having usually came before you had the language for them. The breadbasket ran out. Camilla flagged down the waiter with cheerful authority. Outside, a Boston night settled in the way it always did in November. Without ceremony, without warning, just there, the way the important things tend to be. Elena looked at the table, at her sister, at the man across from her. She stayed.